Good morning. Welcome to the Journyx Project Execute webinar entitled Improving Project Execution with Better Resource Management. My name is James Bronner. I'm the Director of Marketing with Journyx, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. First, I'd like to extend a big thank you for all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I promise you that we will have you back working productively in just under 30 minutes. Next, a few housekeeping items. Should you have the need to maximize your screen for better viewing, there are controls at the bottom of your screen. And then finally, you can submit questions online anytime during the presentation through the WebEx controls, which are located on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be collecting those as the presentation moves forward and then reading them at the end of our Q&A time. Our agenda today will be quite straightforward. First, Brian Peterson, our Director of Applications Consulting, will take us through the webinar. And then we'll begin responding to your submitted questions during the Q&A time. So without further ado, let me hand over to Brian.
Thanks, James. Well, again, this is our webinar on improving project execution with better resource management. In this time, we're going to explore some of the areas that you can benefit by effectively managing your portfolio of resources. We're going to talk about how to smooth the resource utilization curve, how to have a better understanding of where your project is, and knowing the I for the ROI of your project, and maximizing basically your most valuable asset, which is your employees. My name again is Brian Peterson. I am the Director of Application Consulting for Journyx, and I've been working with a variety of customers all over the world in areas of project execution, resource management, project time tracking, cost accounting, and more for almost a decade now. So without further ado, let's dive right into the areas of resource management. What is resource management? Do you have the right people working on the right task? Do you know what your people are working on? What about that project you've got coming up next quarter? Do you have the capacity to get that project done? How much time are your people spending sitting on the bench, and what is that costing you? These are all some of the questions that many people are looking to answer when they talk about resource management. Now, you can put some really detailed labels on it, such as resource leveling, critical chain planning, resource capacity planning, resource tracking, and many others. Quite simply, resource management helps you answer questions like, do you know where your project is? Who can do this particular task? Is everyone fully utilized? And do we have the right staff? What is the I, or the investment for the ROI of this particular project? And does our CXO, or our executive team, know what projects are currently being worked on? Resource management is one of the key reasons that organizations move from an individual approach to a more enterprise approach regarding projects. Whether it's bringing together projects from various parts of the organization, or combining formal projects with organizational initiatives, internal service requests, and time off, resource management helps make your project environment more collaborative. Let's look at some of the key areas where this helps and impacts on your organization as a whole. Recently, the Center for Business Practices surveyed a broad spectrum of organizations with regards to issues the surrounding resource management challenges. Now, we'll explore some of these key findings a little bit later, but one of the things that they discovered was that there are significant challenges in all components of resource management. Specifically, the main issues are around understanding the number of resources needed to complete projects. The top 5 most significant resource management challenges that the Center for Business Practices survey concluded was that, number 1, resource planning and capacity planning is poor. Number 2, there's not enough appropriately skilled resources, too many unplanned requests for resources, and also that resource use was not optimized across the organization. And finally, that effort estimation is inaccurate. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Tracking employee time by project and task provides managers with the average utilization rate of all of their resources. In most organizations, there's a bell curve illustrating how people are utilized or not utilized on projects. And what we typically see is that an average of 5 to 10% of our staff is not 100% allocated. And 60 to 75% of the staff have the median amount of work, doing the bulk of the work. In my experience, one of the main causes of this is due to project slip. If someone, for example, assigns work on a task and that's late for some reason, like something else didn't get accomplished or the server's still on back order or whatever, people often don't know what it is they need to do next. So by understanding the status of projects along with resource availability, we can easily reallocate tasks to available team members and continue to keep all of the project work moving forward and on track. Now this last 10 to 15% over here of the staff, these are the star performers. These are the people who are overutilized, sometimes as much as 150%. And as these people continue to work in this environment, burnout is a very serious issue. We often see in IT organizations that these over-allocated and highly skilled individuals are the most likely to leave as new opportunities arise. Now, another area of cost to consider is that of turnover and the cost associated with replacing these star performers. By being able to assign people work based on availability and monitoring these over-allocated individuals, you can take huge steps in mitigating that risk. In fact, according to a recent article in Tech Republic, a survey by the Association of Information Technology Professionals showed that, quote, many IT employees experience burnout. Consider taking another job at a much lower salary to eliminate their job stress, end quote. So as you can see, over-allocation and our resource management not only affects our project, but also affects our employees and their productivity, and even our overall staffing issues as it affects people's job environments. CIO Update provides a solution to this burnout problem. They say delegate carefully. You may be tempted to give assignments to that same reliable employee that you always do. However, in doing so, you may be overburdening those staff members while losing a valuable opportunity for others on your team to develop new skills. So how can managers ensure that they're not assigning too much work to already over-allocated staff? Well, monitoring the allocation of all of your staff and project team and assigning people project work based on their availability and also matching with their capacity and skills helps to mitigate this risk. So every time you have one of these star performers, these over-allocated individuals, every time one of them takes on too much work or becomes ill or is not able to do their particular task, the organization kind of groans a little bit and causes a little bit of chaos with the organization. Now, on the other hand, there are those people who are underutilized at the other end. And even when project managers go around and try to understand our resource availability, it often changes. It's dynamic. We might run around and get all of everybody's current assignments and vacation schedules and compile that all into a big spreadsheet only to find out that as soon as we walk away, that's all invalidated because everything's moved around or everything has changed. So what we need as project managers is to be able, in real time, to access our team members' schedules and availability, look at their tasks and available time in order to assign people to these tasks more effectively and more efficiently. The right resource management solution enables managers to calculate the cost of those underutilized or on the bench staff members. Understanding what this non-productive time is costing the company is very, very important. And real-time access to resource allocation data allows managers to assign work to available staff, resulting in a far greater return on labor cost. By knowing the associated cost of this productive time, you can easily calculate the avoidance of the idle costs and factor in the increase in productivity. Now, that time on the bench will never ever reach zero. Now, even though it won't reach zero, it's clear that you can see that by having visibility into your team's overall availability and being able to assign work to those people who are available, more work can be accomplished faster, and you have a far greater return on your investment of labor costs. And if you have billable consultants, for example, it's easy to dollarize the effects on the organization. To put this into context, by implementing a resource management solution, you'd have a central pool of resources giving you visibility into the overall availability and the ability to allocate the right people to the right job and minimize that time on the bench. Now, let's take an example. If by doing that we could conservatively say we could add 3 additional billable or productive hours per month for each of your employees or for each of your consultants. And for argument's sake, let's say the average bill rate was, let's say, $85 an hour. So then if you take 50 consultants, that would result in roughly an additional $150,000 per year in additional billable revenue. And that's just by adding an additional 3 billable productive hours per person per month. And, of course, using those very conservative figures of an $85 an hour bill rate. And it would not be out of the ordinary to expect more hours of productivity just by having that one pane of glass view, that central repository view into all of your resources. Now, of course, this goes just beyond direct increases in billable revenue. Increases in productivity is another area where you see substantial return on investment with regards to resource management. Organizations need a platform for managing people and tracking actuals, helping managers understand and manage their actual costs, as well as the capacity to take on additional new work. Now, this is extremely helpful for service organizations that bill for their time, as we've seen. For a lot of organizations, implementing a resource management solution provides visibility into overall resource availability and the ability to allocate the right people to the right job and minimize that bench time. But this can also be translated into an increase in productivity for organizations that don't directly bill for their time. So you could even extrapolate what we were talking about, increasing billability, those additional billable hours, as productive hours, and how much more work could get accomplished, how much more return you'd get on that labor investment. By categorizing staff by skills or function, managers can assign the right people to the right jobs. For example, if a DBA is needed for a particular project, you'd easily be able to see who's available for that particular time frame. What DBAs do you have available, and what is their capacity during that time frame for that particular project? And you can also use this data to identify staffing gaps. If there's only one DBA who's constantly working at over 100% allocation, well, you know that you need to hire some additional DBAs. Now, effective resource management has implications across the entire organization. Earlier, we mentioned the survey that was conducted by the Center for Business Practices, and one of the conclusions from that survey that I found most interesting was the direct correlation between organizational performance and the level of resource management maturity of the organization. Essentially, the better that an organization manages their resources, the better that organization performs as a whole. And you can see these findings here, and that for each of these 8 areas that they measured, organizational performance, improvements were seen as the organization's resource management matured. And they measured resource management maturity on a scale of 1 to 5. Now, another very interesting finding that the CBP survey produced was that a high number of organizations surveyed were not mature with resource management. Almost 75% within participating in the survey were either a 1 or a 2 in the maturity scale. So this means that just by putting a moderately mature resource management process in place, just by implementing a level 3, let's say, you're in the top 25 percentile of organizations in terms of performance. So you can see that not only implementing an effective resource management process enables you to keep your star performers and make your entire team more productive and effective and increase your revenue, but it can also aid the organization's performance and give you a competitive advantage. And better resource management is not that hard to get. Basically what you need is to have complete visibility and insight into resource availability, which means you need to be able to see not just what project a person is working on, but also factor in things like organizational initiatives, non-project work, overhead, vacation, leave, so that when you're scheduling a task, you need to be able to quickly see and find the person or people you're looking for, understand if they're available, and easily assign them to that work. This not only allows you to assign people to specific tasks and manage their allocation, minimizing their time on the bench, but it also gives you insight into their capacity. Again, that big project you've got coming up next quarter, do you have the available resources to take that work on? Are you sure? Is nothing else going to be affected if you do take that work on? By effectively managing your resources and gaining that valuable insight into resource availability, you'll be able to know. Resource management can help manage and monitor how your people and financial resources are being utilized in real time. And this allows organizations to keep an eye on their most valuable asset and allow them to determine if there are any serious problems with waste. Implementing a high-quality resource management solution gives you extensive reporting capabilities and functions right there at your fingertips. And this will ultimately allow you to increase your ability to predict the needs of the organizations tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and even beyond. It also leads to greater improvements in the organization's overall performance. So with that, we'd like to wrap up and get to maybe some of your questions. It'll take us just a second to get all of those organized. While we're doing that, I'd like to mention a couple of things. Number one, the solution that we were using as an example of a resource management solution is Journyx Project Execute. And if you'd like more information on that solution to help manage these critical resources of project success, we'll put in some contact information and help you give you some information where you can find out more. Secondly, I'd like to mention that Journyx is very excited. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to be presenting the Chief Executive Officer of Cognitive Technologies, Dr. Karen McGraw, who's going to be presenting the findings of their recent project management or project resource management survey and some of the surprising insights on how organizations are utilizing and underutilizing project resource management tools and processes. And all attendees will also get a copy of the research report, and that is tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern Time. And you can find out more on our website at webinars.journyx.com. So with that, I'll turn that back over to James for questions.
Thanks, Brian. I'll now be opening up the Q&A portion of our presentation. If you haven't done so already, please submit your question via the WebEx controls there on the right-hand side of your screen. Brian, it looks like our first question comes in from Bill. He says, well, a very simple question. He says, is the survey on resource management you mentioned available for download?
I believe it is. I believe that there is kind of a summary of the survey findings that is available for download, and the full survey might also be available. We can follow up with you after that and provide you that information. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, Brian, that we'd be happy to send you over. In fact, I'm not sure that it's up on our website yet, but we can just email a copy to you. So if you just let us know, we'll be happy to send you a copy of that research finding. The second question comes in from Russell. He says, we use Microsoft Project and typically label resources as number 1, number 2, etc. Does your tool integrate with Microsoft Project, and will it allow us to bring in actual resources?
Well, let me take that in two parts. The first question, of course, being the kind of generic resources. So you go in and you build your project and you label, kind of put these placeholder resources. I know I need DBA 1 or developer number 3 on this particular task. I understand the reasoning for doing that, and that is a good idea to put those placeholders in there. However, when you're looking at resource availability, you want to make sure that you're not only looking at people who are over or underutilized, but also make sure that you have all of your project completely allocated to tasks. So in a lot of places, especially like in Microsoft Project, for example, you'll see that that task looks to be assigned when it's actually only a placeholder or generic resource there. So what a lot of companies will do is actually put extra fields, whether it be in Microsoft Project or some other tool, as to their resource requirements. This needs a DBA with these skills, or this needs this level of consultant, or what have you, and still leave that open so that they can see that still needs to have assignments made to that. The second part of the question, specifically about Journyx Project Execute, yes, it does have a seamless integration both with Microsoft Project Desktop and Project Server, where we can bring in actual resources and combine that data with other things that they're working on. For example, in a lot of organizations, they're managing a lot of their projects in something like Project Server or even Desktop Project, and they also have all of this work that kind of falls outside of that, like service requests or smaller, like 3-person, 3-day projects. So what having a centralized pool of resource availability allows you to do is get a true sense of what people's capacity is. For example, if you went to go assign someone to a task in, let's say, Project Server, for example, they look to be completely open, but you find out later only that they're completely, actually over-allocated with all of these service requests that exist outside of Project Server. So now you've got to spend a lot of cycle time and bandwidth going back and updating your schedule and understanding who you can put on it and when you can shift this task and that sort of thing. So with a tool like Project Execute, we bring all of that data together, so when you're looking at resource capacity and availability, you're getting that true sense of everything that they're working on, not just their specific project data that exists in Microsoft Project. And with the synchronization, allows you to bring data from project and also their actual hours and status and progress back from Journyx over back into project.
Thanks, Brian. Jim's a little confused. He says, what does this solution provide over and above what we use, which is Microsoft Project?
Well, that's a great question, and I kind of started to allude to that in that last answer. What you really want to be able to do is have a good understanding of what everyone is working on, what your resource capacity is, and make sure that you've got everybody assigned and the right people on the right project, and everything is fully allocated. Now, some organizations can put their entire breadth of work into Microsoft Project so that when they are looking at resource availability, they are looking at their true availability. Now, for a lot of organizations, that's just not possible. Let me give you an example. We had one customer I was working with was using Project Server to manage all of their formal projects, so they put them all in Project Server. They tracked their time with PWA and did all of that and managed their resources right in Project Server. However, they had a large group of work, what they called smaller projects and service requests, that existed outside of Project Server. They were actually out of their ERP system. And because, of course, these were shared resources and shared project team, you had people that were doing work from those projects in the ERP tool as well as those in Project Server. So Project Server didn't provide them the full capacity of their resource availability. So when someone, again, went to go assign someone to a task, if they look to be available, that they may or may not be available. They weren't sure because there may be all these things that they're working on that are outside of Project Server. So what their solution was to have Journyx kind of sit in the middle there and be kind of that uniform resource availability. We're passing data from Project Server, passing data from their ERP system when they looked at what their capacity was for assigning people to tasks and also understanding what their future work could be, what sort of work could they take on in the future. They were getting a true sense of where their team was allocated and how much capacity they could take on. So, to answer your question, how does this add on to or extend what you're already using, something like Microsoft Project? Again, it provides you that one pane of glass view of resource management and resource availability across everything they're working on, not just in Microsoft Project. That being said, if everything that you work on, all of your project, all of your non-project work, all of your organizational initiatives, everything is in Microsoft Project, then that might be able to work. You might be able to do it all within Project.
Thanks, Brian. I guess to summarize that for Jim, I guess what we really do is we enhance and extend Microsoft Project, kind of take it to the next level. In fact, Brian does another webinar entitled Enhancing and Extending Microsoft Project. You might want to check into that, Jim. We've got another one coming up beginning of next week. Our next question comes in from Anne. She says, does your solution allow us to label resources by expertise so I can search for specifics?
Absolutely. That's a very key component to any resource management tool, especially when you're getting into shared resource teams. You may know what your resource or staffing requirements are for this particular project or task, but you may not know who the people are that you need to have working on this. You know you need a Java programmer with a certain level of expertise, but you may not know who that person is. So by being able to categorize people by different things like skills and locations and any sort of other attributes, you can go in and easily find who it is that you're needing to put on, again, putting the right person on the right task or project. So specifically with Project Execute, with Journyx, yes, it does allow you to attach skills. It allows you to attach a variety of customizable attributes and fields to your resources. So I could find a full-time employee who is a Java developer who is in Austin, who is available during this time period. I can easily find anybody that meets that criteria. Again, putting the right person on the right task.
Good. Thanks, Brian. Jason asks, he says, does the solution integrate with any ERP systems, such as SAP, OpenERP, or maybe even another PPM tool?
It does. It's a very open system and can actually integrate with a large number of tools like that. We've integrated with a number of ERP systems, a number of other financial packages, HR systems, you name it. The idea is to kind of sit in the middle of the organization and pull data in from those other parts and be able to send that out. Again, you're having that one pane of glass view into all these other things, so that's going to be pulling data from all these other systems. So that's something that's very common for us, yes.
Thanks, Brian. It looks like we're coming to the end of our time, but I did want to do what Brian had done earlier, and that is remind those of you that are still on the call that there's an additional webinar that's taking place tomorrow. If you're interested in resource management, resource allocation issues, there's a great research study that was just completed earlier this year by the CEO of Cognitive Technologies, Dr. Karen McGraw. She's going to be presenting those findings tomorrow during a webinar. And I think, as we mentioned, that's going to take place tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern. You can get more information at webinars.journyx.com and go ahead and register for that, and you'll get a nice copy of that report. The findings there are pretty eye-opening as far as the industry is concerned. Well, as I said, we've come to the end of our time. There's still a few more questions that are coming in. Feel free to continue to post your questions, and since we have your contact info, we'll respond to you privately with a response to your question. And we do want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend with us this morning. Should you have additional questions or would like to see perhaps a more in-depth view of the solution entitled Project Execute that Brian mentioned, our contact information is there on the screen. Remember, we don't want you just to plan, but to execute. Have a wonderful day.